Hey guys, welcome back. Some of you guys have already heard this, but I'm going to go over it again. Tonight we're going to be talking about the Facebook group I started called Automotive Weekly Waveforms. And what the whole goal of this is to post a new test up every week. I'm thinking Sunday, and throughout the week, if you have a vehicle that comes in the shop that is suitable for the test, then go ahead and grab a capture, post up the capture, and what we're all about is getting our hands on that scope, hooking up to the vehicle, and getting waveforms. Because if we don't break it out even once or twice a week, then those skills are going to slowly fade away. We're not going to gain anything from this. So I know I know we had some jokes about homework. I saw some posts on Cody Gaddy's doing some homework, and someone said I assigned it. Was that Jason? I think so. But if you don't want to think of it as homework, think of it as a skill building exercise. You're not being graded on it yet, but it would be nice to have you guys, at least attempt these captures throughout the week. And we already have a ton of people posting captures similar to mine in the Facebook group. And so what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to go over what my test was and some of the captures that some people obtained. Sunday's good. Yeah, I figured Sunday because, then you have all week, and then if you don't get something during the week, you might have some free time on a Saturday to grab that capture and post it up.
You want to turn your audio up just a smidge?
I could be too far away from the microphone. Okay, how's that? Is that a little better? Okay, let me... So this is some of the posts from the Facebook group. This is just one that I posted. I think that was the initial picture in the group. LaRue posted this one up before we even had an assignment. He's jumping the gun. He wanted to be the first in line to get a capture out there. Good job. There was some technical discussion on that one. But the waveform that we were going after, which it didn't show my capture, was just hooking the scope up to the battery, setting our scope up to look at DC volts on like a 20 volt scale, and then checking what our static voltage is, cranking up the vehicle, letting it run for a couple seconds, and then shutting it down, saving that capture, and then we can analyze, look at the waveform, see how low our voltage went, and then see how high our charging voltage went. And there's a lot of other small details we can pick up in these captures as well. So here is one from Stuart, and he's in Australia. So let me see if I can make this any bigger here. Just a little bit. You can see his battery voltage here. I can barely read it at 12.39, maybe 29. And then you can see a few humps here as he's cranking it up, and it must have fired up fairly quickly. And we have a big peak or hump where the alternator started charging, and then it kind of flattened out a little bit, and then it started charging again. Now, we had a few questions on this one to see if it was a computer-controlled alternator or if there was a problem with it. He responded that this is off of a 1998 Holden 5-liter V8, so very similar to the Ford 5.0 that we have here in the States. Took a blood test, have to go back and retake it. I don't know if you should post those results here. Let me go to the next one. Doug Wilson posted several, and Doug Wilson has several different lab scopes, so he posted several different captures using different lab scopes, which is kind of cool. This one, he just did a quick startup and shutdown. I think he had several Chryslers that he was working on. But on this one, you can see we don't have cursors active, but it dropped down almost to 8 volts, jumped up a little over 14. So we can see it just in this short little period of time that we didn't drop excessively low. Yeah, 8 might be a little borderline. The alternator did start working properly afterwards. And then this is one, so that last one was from his Snap-on. This one's from his eScope Elite. I don't have one of these, the ATS scopes. There's no deadline. Today's not the deadline. I just wanted to kind of recap what was going on. Technically, next Saturday is the deadline because Sunday is a whole new test. So the eScope Elite I have zero experience with. I've never used it, but Doug Wilson does quite a bit of work with it. So it seems like there's a little bit of noise in here, but that could be a setting where I'm just not used to seeing that screen. But same thing, we can see that it dropped just below 8.5 volts. The alternator was putting out a little over 14. And I know there's some advanced measurement stuff going on with this scope, where I'm sure you can zoom in and analyze each component of this waveform. Now this is one I have never used at all, or never even seen in person, the Handtech. And this is Doug Wilson's 8-channel Handtech. And we can see it looks like we're just below 12 volts. So that battery is probably a little weak. He cranked it up, but we didn't drop below 8, so maybe it's a little dead, but it's a large battery and has enough capacity still for that vehicle. It started charging and then he shut it down. Now, there were some weird glitches here. Let me see what his response was to that. He said he was shutting it off quick is all, but that scope does have its limitations. Like I said, I haven't used that one at all. Now, I believe this was a follow-up post that Chris Groff posted to one that looked like it might have a compression issue. And we haven't started analyzing the waveforms at all, but a couple of the guys did post some more advanced pictures in there with some analytics as well. This one was another one from Doug Wilson. I had to let this one run for a little bit longer before it started charging. Some vehicles just take a while. If you tried doing this test on a diesel truck, especially the Ford 7.3 and the 6-liter, the alternator does not charge for at least 30 or 40 seconds, long enough for the computer to turn off the glow plugs. It doesn't run the glow plugs and the alternator at the same time because it could burn out the alternator by overloading it. But he didn't say what this one was for, and I don't see any information saved on it. But his minimum for 8.47 static, or at least his live voltage after the capture, was 12.4, and maximum at 14.46. So a lot of them, had perfectly healthy charging systems. And I like checking vehicles that have good starting and charging systems, so you know what a good waveform looks like. If you did this test on every single vehicle, that one time that it comes up with something funky, you're going to know that there's something wrong. Check your scope leads first. Make sure your scope is, not dying. The battery's not dead. Your USB cable's good. And if it's still kind of a funky waveform, then you can dig in and find out why. This one was from Hans, and this was a Volkswagen van again with a Subaru engine. So more than likely a Subaru alternator, but then it had a aftermarket high torque starter, and he had some issues. It says a GW high torque starter. So he looks like he started it up and then shut it off, and he's got a lot going on in this waveform, more than we discussed in the last one. He has an amp clamp, actually 2 amp clamps, one tied onto the starter, the main hot lead going to the starter, and then one on the solenoid as well. So the first time it seemed to start okay. There's not a lot of noise in the signal. But the second time over here, there's all kinds of stuff going on. And then his voltage waveform is fairly small. Is Jason still being a bully? LaRue posted another one, and I had a few questions on this one as well. So we're above 12 volts. We don't have the min-max visible or cursors. We drop down to close to 8. And then we see some humps here as the engine's turning over. It fires up, the alternator kicks in. But my concern was all these ripples on the alternator. Now it could be a smart alternator or a computer controlled alternator, and it's just fluctuating a little bit. I'm not sure if you guys can see that in detail. It's pretty small. But just seeing that alone, I think I would have jumped into like an AC ripple test or something like that. Battery recharge current test. So you mean checking what the alternator output is going into the battery after we start it up, or using a battery charger to charge the battery? You may have to clarify for me, Pico. Here's the one from Chris Groff that we were kind of wondering what was going on right here. Normally, most vehicles will have some nice even humps, but they kind of work their way up. As that engine starts moving faster, it takes a little less energy to keep going. and then it fires up and takes off. But there was one hump here where it took a little more energy because the voltage dropped down lower. So that's normally an indication that there's some sort of mechanical issue, or maybe there's a misfire and that cylinder just, had a little extra work to happen. If we were looking at an amp clamp, we might see a taller spike or a lower spike, because this will be sort of inverted from what we see on the amp clamp. Yeah, what the battery's drawing off the alternator. Yeah, that'll be a good test, because some batteries, they don't want charged. The alternator's doing as much work as it needs to, and the battery's like, no, I'm good. I don't need to take any more current. Now, here Hans is just showing off the power of the Pico scope. Instead of using the Pico 6 or 7 labscope, he went into the Automotive or the Pico Diagnostics, and he ran the battery test. So if you guys have the Pico scope and you haven't used this, make sure when you download the software that you have the Pico Automotive or the Pico Diagnostic software installed. It'll ask you what the cold cranking amps is. You can barely make it. Well, we're covering one of your posts right now. I wasn't thinking about, Utah time. So he started out at 11.7 volts on this one, which is a little low for testing. It says that the lowest voltage dropped down to 4.67, and the maximum current was 508 amps. So whatever it was pulling quite a bit of power. And it says that that battery capacity is 40% of 700 cold cranking amps, and the battery is bad. It gives additional information on that test. It says that the starter resistance is good, the charging is good, and it went up to 14.2 volts. So that's a pretty powerful test, but I don't always trust it. Sometimes if the information looks good to me and it failed the test, I'll grab my microvat or the interstate battery tester and go over it again. Very true, Valamilk. Let's see. We got a ignition capture in there from LaRue. I think that this was the cause of that ignition capture. So we got some side conversations going on in here as well, but that's perfectly okay. This was looks like maybe another relative compression test. So no voltage on this one, just amperage. And then here's one from Paul Smith. He said that he, let's see if it's in the other one. One of the posts, he said that he picked up this Sun scope and wanted to check out the labscope option in it, which I think is pretty cool, especially when you have an old piece of equipment. A lot of guys won't even touch it. But then if they don't have another labscope in the shop and that's your only scope, then why not break it out and get your hands dirty? So this one isn't going to show us our voltage on the side. It's going to be per division. So let's see, volts per division is 5 volts. So all the way at the bottom would be 0. We got 5, 10, maybe 5, 10, 15. That doesn't make sense either. Not quite sure where the 0. Oh, there we go. There's our 0 line. There's a little earth symbol or ground symbol with negative. So 5, 10, 15. So I can't tell exactly what our voltage is, but at least we don't see any nasty waveforms in there. But it's just kind of cool to see how even the old stuff can work, but then it's also nice to see how technology has advanced. And there's a little clearer picture of that one. And then Theo posted this one. It says it's a hobby scope. I'm not sure which one. I think they changed the name of it. It used to be Logical Canuck, but now it's Gadgets Playlist. I think that's who uses it. He has a Android-based labscope he uses a lot. And it's like a one that you build. It's kind of an interesting one, but a lot of the readouts look like this. Now, can you take the H scope and get a capture of just this screen without any of the other information? I've never used one, so I'm not sure. But we see the same type of deal. A little over 12 volts, nice cranking waveform. The alternator jumps up to just over 15, levels out probably 14.8 or so, and then winds down on shutdown. William Cantrell. Now this was, I think that he was demonstrating something that Chris Groff mentioned. I of holding your foot to the floor and going to clear flood mode. That way you can kind of double the action of the waveform. Sometimes you can get a clear flood waveform, where or relative compression waveform from it, because the computer shuts off the fuel injectors so it doesn't start. But he has voltage and amperage in this one. So looking at the voltage, started out around 12, maybe a little under that, a long cranking waveform, and then he let it fire up, probably released the gas pedal around here. It cranked up and was producing over 14. We do have cursors. So our minimum was actually 5.43. That seems pretty low, but that might have been just a quick spike when that starter engaged and got the engine going. But where the cursor is, we were at 8.2. And then where cursor number 2 is, I guess that's right before the alternator really started kicking in, we were down to 10.57. So the car had started at this point, but the alternator hadn't kicked in. And during that cranking period, we had sucked that battery all the way down to 11 volts after even no more currents exiting that battery. So I would say that battery is probably a little weak. Yeah, he says that the battery needs to be charged. Now, he can't remember this vehicle. I'm going to call him out on this one. I looked at the timestamp. And this isn't a new capture. His timestamp on his Virus, or Zeus, whatever he's working with here, says May 14th of 2019. Come on, William. You're going to have to get a new capture. Mario. I think Mario's just drawn squiggly lines here. Like these are pretty fancy going on here. I think his other post had information about what was what. I believe one of them was a voltage drop across one of the cables. And this looks like some amperage. That is true. I did not say that the waveforms had to be a current waveform. And Chris Daniel got his post in sort of at the last minute, 30 minutes ago. And this was this with the Handtech as well? Yeah. He was having some scaling issues, but I may have to go back and read his actual post. But he at least was able to get the scope out and use it. And he mentioned that he doesn't have a lot of experience using it. And this whole series is the perfect time to go ahead and get those scopes out and get some experience with it, because yeah, current as in amps. If we don't use them, then we're not going to understand what's going on. We're not going to be familiar enough with the scope to just grab it real quick, get a quick capture, and make ourselves efficient as we're diagnosing the vehicles. If it's something that we only break out when we absolutely need it, then we're going to struggle with it a little bit, and that diagnostic process may take a little longer. And I'm guilty of that as well. Before I had a diagnostic cart set up with my Pico scope hanging off the side of it, I didn't scope a lot of vehicles. And even now, I don't always grab the Pico, because normally when I'm going to scope something, I already have the snap-on scanner in my hand, and it's ready to go. I already have the vehicle information in there. And if I save that waveform, it's already got the vehicle information tagged with it when I save it to the Altus drive. So I commonly use the snap-on scope now just because it's readily available. But if I need something a little more in detail, or I want to capture a larger period of time and still be able to zoom in, then I will grab the Pico scope. Okay, so I see there's three captures here. I think that he was putting his cursors up for measurement, but I'm unfamiliar with the scope, so I can't decipher what it is. I'll have to read his post. So I think so far we have let me see. We've done a pretty good job of getting started in this group. Let me see what our member count is first thing here. We're up to 130 members. In a couple of days, I think that's pretty good. Now, I'm hoping to get at least like a 50% in involvement rate with people posting waveforms. I think if we even 30% would be good. If we can keep that kind of number going, then we'll have plenty of waveforms and plenty of people in the community building those skills up. Now, I understand that sometimes those vehicles don't come in. You may not have the accessory that we are using at the time. But if we have another way of working around that accessory, then I'll try to explain that as well. There's going to be some tests that vehicle just doesn't come in at all, especially if we get a test where it's going to be like a 3-phase fuel pump or water pump. There's only a few vehicles that are using those currently. BMW on the water pumps, Toyota and a few others, modern vehicles on the fuel pumps. So that may not be something that's readily available. I have yet to have a 3-phase fuel pump come in the door for me to even test. So I also have, when he said that he had that sunscope, which Doug Wilson's talking about right now, my dad has a couple of old sunscopes as well, and he has some of the handheld models. So I may see if I can break that out for some of the tests, because some of the tests, you really don't need a, $5,000 or $2,000 labscope, whatever it may be. A $100 USB single channel labscope or a U-scope will work perfectly fine. Even if you can find an old Vantage or Sunscope, you may be able to get some of the captures. And the old Vantage and Sunscope has a lot of known good waveforms in there. Even though they're kind of grainy, they're not the highest detail. At least you can compare what you captured on the vehicle to something maybe that looks like it, or you have an issue. So is there any questions so far? I know that this wasn't like a super big live stream where we're covering a lot of technical information. I just kind of wanted to recap the group. So if you guys have any questions so far about the group, let me know. If you guys have any recommendations for future tests, I've got a list made out so far for the next couple of weeks, stuff I would like to do. But if there's something that everyone agrees on should be covered and it's not what I have in my order, then we can go ahead and do that as well. And there's certain tests that I know that I'm not going to think of. So if you guys like to see something specific, or if there's an area that you're struggling with, then let me know and we'll cover that as well. Farrar says, fuel pump RPM, where do you find the specs? I don't know. I don't know if they have specs for that. Most manufacturers don't always show known good waveforms or information for scope users. More and more of them are finally starting to do the cam sensor, crank sensor correlation waveforms. Toyota is starting to do quite a few on the PCM pinouts. But for RPM of the fuel pump, it seems like most are between 5,000 and 6,000 RPM within a certain amperage range. And if it's above or below that, then you have an issue. If it's way above that, then you could be out of fuel, or the impellers are junk and the pump is just spinning way too fast. If it's below that, then there may be low voltage going to the pump, causing it to slow down. There may be a failed pressure regulator, and that pump is working really, really hard, and it just can't spin that fast. So yeah, just like Hans says, make your own known good. Start building a library. I should probably cover that in another live stream or video on how to save your waveforms. And that noise, like licking lips, is my dog. I don't know if you guys could hear that or not.
I'm going behind you. It's gonna knock it over.
Bella, come here.
Go. Go back.
Back it up.
She's gonna knock it over. Wait a second.
I'm going to hold on to my green screen while my dog tries to knock everything over.
1 second. I'll get her. Go back.
So Hans says that some of the Audis spin around 15 amps at full 12 volts. And I'm sure that's on one of the newer ones that is running a fuel pump control module that kind of drops that voltage down by pulse width modulating the signal and slows the pump down. And if it really wants to ramp it up, it can go full voltage. And at that point, we're probably close to 90 or 100 PSI. I haven't tested any of those, so Hans may be able to give us some more information. But what I was going to say is I need to cover a video on saving our files, because grabbing the screen capture like I did on the Zeus, and many of you guys did with your cell phones, is a great way just to have that quick image. But if we want to analyze that image down the road and be able to zoom in and out or manipulate it in any way, we're going to want to save that into a database of some sort. Now, there's plenty of online databases that have been started already, but uh, sorry, cracking up at Daniel's post there, or Chris Daniel's post. So yeah, I know some of the guys have like really nice file systems for their known goods and known bads, and everything that gets captured gets saved into a certain file. Some guys do it online. I'm terrible. I don't keep the same format every time I save a waveform. I don't save every waveform. I really need to, but it's just something that I'm really bad at organization. Yeah, I gave away a Snap-on Zeus. It was pink edition, and I didn't give away just like 10% of it to charity, Brandon. I gave all of it. So you guys are gonna have to step up your game. Let's see. I'm just gonna flip through here, see if there's any other questions I missed. I know Valerie. Did I miss anything obvious?
No, I don't.
No. Okay. Um. So what test do you guys want to see next? We did battery voltage for starting and charging. If you guys have a suggestion on what the next one is, then maybe I'll take that one over what's in my list. I kind of want to do as many, which we can mix them up. I want to do a lot of them without accessories to begin with, because a lot of guys have scopes that they just bought. They don't have an amp clamp yet. And I know that for some of us that we buy tools all the time, $100 or $200 amp clamp doesn't seem like a big deal. But for some guys, they may have to save up for a couple weeks or a month before they can spend that $100 on an amp clamp. And we don't always want them buying the cheapest, piece of junk out there just so they can use it in the waveform. So Brandon from Jarhead wants to do a relative compression with a cylinder sink. We can do that with no accessories. That is very true. I think for the cylinder sink, we are going to need, we might need to cover getting that capture, because it's either going to be normally ignition is the best way to go, but there's certain precautions we have to take depending on the ignition system. So we may need to cover getting a sync signal, and then covering that with a relative compression using voltage. And I'm trying to do it one test at a time just so we can keep building on each skill. But since we already did the cranking test, we can add in that sync signal for the next one. Primary ignition waveform. That's on my list as well, but that's not always a simple capture. Some vehicles we can't get a primary ignition waveform. So it's not always applicable to every vehicle, especially if it's a coil on plug vehicle with built-in transistors or ignition control modules. Yes, definitely, Daniel. That is why I need to cover gaining a sync signal from an ignition coil, because if it is a solenoid or a coil, then we do need to make sure we are protecting our scopes. AC ripple test. Now that is on my list of the next couple of videos. So you guys are kind of thinking along the same lines I am. I just want to make sure that I was on the right page. Kind of continuing from this test. So my next test, it wasn't the AC ripple test, but I can switch them around. My next one was more of a starter test, but we can go with the ripple test, and then we may throw in an accessory for some of the guys that do have those accessories. And absolutely, if you have the Snap-on or ATS, you don't need the attenuator. That is one nice thing about those scopes. They have built-in protection. If I have some new users that are extremely unfamiliar with scope usage, Try to follow the series. I hope that I'm covering the basics, the starting point, that anybody can grab the scope, watch the video, and gain the capture that I'm getting. As we excel to higher levels in this, I'm not going to cover the scope usage as much, but more of the technique and the hookup required to get that waveform. So I think down the road, when we get some new guys in, we may have to send them back up to the beginning to learn how to use the scope for simple tests before getting into the advanced ones. Because I know it's fun to get into the advanced tests, but sometimes that presents its own challenges and the danger aspect of, am I going to damage the scope, or am I going to be looking at too much information that I don't have the ability to analyze? Test the brake pad thickness with the scope. Is that really all you're doing still? I mean, we're going on like 4 months of brake jobs. He's not a doctor. I thought he had a PhD in automotive repair. Yeah, we can do an RC test without a sync, and continue on with this, and then we'll show how to add in a sync. I think that's a good idea. So I think that about wraps up what I had for you guys. Like I said, feel free to post your waveforms in the Facebook group. I should probably post that link to the group. If you're not already a member of that group and you wanted to join in, then click the join button, fill out the questions, join in. I have this week's post pinned up to the top. It should be for everyone else. I'm not quite sure if I operated Facebook correctly, but that has the video link to it for the test that we're doing for the week with the basic description of that test. I'll continue to do that each week. I'll pin a new post up to the top so everyone knows what we're on. And then if you're looking for the older test, then you may have to just go back a page or find it in YouTube and click on that first video. Yeah, we'll try not to make smoke machines out of our scopes. AC coupling a DC motor like a fuel pump. Yeah, that is a great test as well. And we can even do, without an amp clamp, we can check kind of what our RPM is and check for major glitches in our fuel pump just by using the voltage. So I think you guys are thinking along the same lines as I am. So I think that's where we'll go next. I appreciate you guys coming out today, and I'll see you later.